It's March 26th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the temporary suspension of doctors' licenses. The government has decided to postpone the suspension of licenses of doctors who are still taking part in a mass walkout. Medical school professors began submitting their resignation letters on Monday and are now working at a reduced 52 hours per week. The UN Security Council has called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza for the first time since the conflict began in October. But the U.S. didn't veto the measure, which prompted a strong rebuke from Israel. Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged for the first time that radical Islamists carried out the deadly attack at a concert hall in Moscow. But he is also certain that they were linked to Ukraine. The South Korean government has decided to put the suspending of licenses of doctors on a mass walkout on hold for now. Still, medical school professors started to step down from their posts on Monday. Our Song Yoo-jin leads us this morning.
The Korean government has reportedly postponed the suspension of medical licenses for trainee doctors who've walked out in protest of increasing the med school admission quota. Suspensions were set to start on Tuesday, but an unnamed official from the presidential office told Yonhap News on Monday that things are on hold temporarily. The official said the government cannot carry out license suspensions while trying to engage in dialogue with the medical community. Over the past several days, the government has been softening its hardline stance. On Sunday, President Yoon asked Prime Minister Han Duck-soo for flexible measures to resolve the dispute and establish a constructive council for consulting with doctors. Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong on Monday also described such efforts by the government.
The government has immediately begun working towards establishing discussions with the medical community and will come up with a day for both sides to sit down for talks as soon as possible.
But the minister made it clear that the government will stick to its original plan to increase the med school quota by 2,000 from next year.
We will certainly complete the goal of the expanding medical school admissions for the first time in 27 years. We ask for your support until the end.
The medical community says it's willing to talk, but with conditions.
Unless the government withdraws its plan to increase the medical school quota and allocation, this crisis cannot be resolved. We are ready to discuss all pending issues in front of the public, but I don't believe withdrawing the plan equals to eliminating the expansion entirely.
But it appears there's still a long road ahead for dialogue. Professors from most of the country's 40 medical schools began submitting their resignations on Monday in solidarity with trainee doctors who have been in a standoff with the government since last month. Some schools witnessed the majority of their professors resigning, including 433 out of 770 at Ulsan University. While they've been covering for the trainee doctors, the Medical Professors Association of Korea announced on Monday morning that professors who continue to work even after submitting their resignations will start reducing the number of outpatient appointments to focus on intensive or emergency care. They'll also cut back their weekly working hours to the legal maximum of 52 due to excessive workloads. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
President Yoon visited the chip stronghold city of Yongin on Monday for another round of policy discussions. There, he said, new facilities will be centered on that city for a mega semiconductor cluster. Our Oh Soo-young has the details.
President Yoon has promised new homes, roads and urban facilities to support a mega semiconductor cluster centered on Yongin City in Gyeonggi-do Province. This came on Monday as he held the 23rd edition of his series of public policy discussions with citizens. Returning to Yongin, where he held his first policy talk on building a semiconductor mega cluster in the wider province, Yoon laid out plans to scale up the quality of work and life in the city through supportive infrastructure projects. As chip giants Samsung and SK Hynix invest some 500 trillion won or $372 billion into the city as the axis of the semiconductor belt, according to the government's estimates, new residents and commuters are expected to flood in to top 1.5 million in the near future.
용인이 이렇게 커 나가기 위해서는 행정, 교통, 주거를 비롯해서 민생과 직결된 인프라를 확실하게 구축하는 것이 가장 중요합니다.
This includes a semiconductor expressway stretching across the cities of Yongin, Hwasong and Ansong. Yoon also said the national highway Route 45 will be expanded, along with improved roads and railway lines connecting the provincial cities to enable an easier commute. To upgrade urban livelihoods for new city dwellers, Yongin will create a residential and cultural complex town along with smaller townships to provide quality housing and amenities for the younger generations and senior citizens. A new Semiconductor Meister High School will also open in Yongin to foster a local talent pool for the surrounding chip industry. To facilitate these plans, the government will push to enact a law on special cities to give them more decision-making authority for their respective development projects.
아울러 시립박물관과 시립예술관 설립에 관한 중앙정부의 권한을 지역으로 대폭 이관해서 자유롭게 설립할 수 있도록 하고 청년들이 용인에서 문화예술 기량을 마음껏 펼치고 창작 기회를 누릴 수 있도록 함과 아울러서 시민들의 문화예술 접근권도 높이겠습니다.
Yongin, along with Changwon, Suwon and Goyang, have been designated as special cities with more than 1 million residents. Last year, Yongin was selected as a candidate site to build a national industrial complex and became part of the government's plan to foster a 21 million square metre semiconductor mega cluster across Gyeonggi-do province. The cluster is expected to be the largest in the world by 2047 and capable of producing 7.7 million wafers per month by the year 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's sister Kim Yo-jong said in a statement on Monday that a Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida expressed a desire to meet with his North Korean counterpart at an early date. For more, we're joined by Dr. Mark Barry. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Good morning. What's the North's intention by making Kishida's offer public? I mean, why let the world know about it?
Well, the February statement, not this month's statement, was actually rather, reasonable, hopeful, slightly hopeful tone. And that's fine. But then the really difficult part is the negotiations that must take place behind closed doors, whether they're happening in Beijing or Singapore or who knows, but they're happening at hopefully at a very high level. But I believe that Kim Yo-jong's remarks yesterday kind of threw cold water on the process, and it doesn't make it easier for the diplomats or other senior political figures who may be negotiating this to get this done. And on top of it all, this afternoon or this evening, there was supposed to be a football match between Japan and North Korea in Pyongyang, a qualifier for the 2026 World Cup. And all of a sudden, North Korea decided they didn't want to have the Japanese come, allegedly because of, quote unquote, disease among some of the players or staff. So as a result, North Korea ends up forfeiting the game. So it's sending a very bizarre mixed message at this time, and it's unfortunate because there's not a lot of light on the horizon politically with North Korea right now.
Definitely. Then we have to talk about what's on Japan's mind. I mean, why does Kishida want to sit down for talks with Kim Jong-un? What is there to talk about between the two?
Well, outwardly, the abductee issue is an extremely emotional issue, even though it only involves a handful of people who may still be alive. Japan, of course, believes that a lot more were abducted, and that may well be true. But the problem is for Kim Jong-un is that his position is, hey, my dad solved all of this back in 2002 and again in 2004 with Prime Minister Koizumi. And, if you want to come see me, that's great. We have a lot to talk about. But the abductees is no longer an issue. So outwardly, that's one of the reasons that Kishida believes he needs to come. And of course, it will improve his rather low popularity and the scandals going on among some of the factions in the LDP party. but also the Kishida is quite concerned with the military situation in North Korea, the fact that missiles are being launched and many of them landing in Japan's wider economic zone. And quite frankly, I think he's also, Kishida is quite concerned with the closer relationship between North Korea and Russia for a lot of reasons, because that's allowing a bad actor even more access into the neighborhood. And as it is, Japanese-Russian relations have never been all that great since the end of World War II.
Dr. Barry, then I have to ask you, how likely is it that such a meeting will actually happen? I mean, you've hinted to me earlier before we went on air, Cuba can play a role here. Let's talk about that.
Well, my point with Cuba is that I applaud President Yoon starting the opening of relations with Cuba, because it really has not improved with the United States, despite Obama reestablishing diplomatic relations. But the interesting thing about Cuba and North Korea is that they have astoundingly good relations. And I think overall, Cuba can be helpful. Now, whether they can be helpful with Japan as opposed to inter-Korean relations or other things, I don't know. But there's an excellent track record that Cuba has in terms of its relationship with North Korea. However, the chances of a summit happening, I think, are the fact that I think the biggest problem is not Prime Minister Kishida, and I don't think there's a huge problem that Biden would have with it happening, and I think he's getting a lot of firsthand information from Ambassador Rahm Emanuel, who's a close personal friend and is now the ambassador to Japan. I think the problem is that Kim Jong-un and his sister and the people close around them are not as talented a group of people who existed around Kim Il-sung and who existed around his father, Kim Jong-il. They're quite green at diplomacy and maneuvering in the good old ways, so to speak, that Stalin and Khrushchev and Brezhnev and Mao and Deng Xiaoping could maneuver. And as a result, he's making a lot of pitfalls, Kim Jong-un, and I think he's making it a lot less likely that it could happen, even though the overall international environment is not all that supportive of progress between Japan and Korea right now.
Dr. Barry, before I let you go, in the meantime, a very senior North Korean official has been meeting very senior Chinese party and government officials in Beijing for the last 3 days. What's your analysis of this move? I mean, what is the North trying to get out of China?
Well, they're locked into the fact that it's the 75th anniversary of DPRK-China relations. And it's going to imply, in my view, almost as a certainty, that Kim Jong-un will have to make a trip to Beijing. So what Kim Sung-nam, who heads the international department, and the most important relations are done party to party between China and North Korea, not on the governmental level. So this gentleman is very, very close to Kim Jong-un. He can speak authoritatively, and he's probably setting up a whole plan of action that would culminate with Kim Jong-un's visit, maybe in October, to Beijing to meet with President Xi. The problem is that he's kind of empty-handed right now. So I think that's another reason that Kim Jong-un really would like to have, on one hand, a summit with Kishida, because he doesn't have anything from Biden or from Trump. But at the same time, he can't give in ways, Kim Jong-un, that Kishida would like him to give in. So this is very sensitive. But I think North Korea has no choice but to show at least some sign of improvement with China, and that's despite the improvement of relations between Russia and North Korea.
Definitely. All right, Dr. Barry, thank you so much for your insight. As always, we appreciate it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Despite Islamic State claiming responsibility for last Friday's terror attack at a council hall in Moscow that killed over 130 people, Russian President Vladimir Putin insists Ukraine was involved. While Putin acknowledged the Islamists conducted the act, he says Ukraine was ultimately behind it. Lee Seung-jae reports.
For the first time since the deadly terror attack at the Crocus City Hall near Moscow, Russian President Vladimir Putin acknowledged that radical Islamists were behind the attack that killed at least 139 people, including 3 children.
We know that the crime was committed by the hands of radical Islamists, followers of an ideology that the Islamic world itself has been fighting against for centuries.
However, despite ISIS releasing a 90-second video claiming responsibility for the deadly terror attack, Putin insisted that Ukraine was ultimately behind the attack.
And immediately a question arises: who benefits from this? This atrocity may just be a link in a whole series of attempts by those who have been at war with our country since 2014 by the hands of the neo-Nazi Kiev regime. And the Nazis, as is well known, have never hesitated to use the dirtiest and most inhumane means to achieve their goals.
Washington once again refuted the accusation, calling it a propaganda campaign by the Kremlin, emphasizing that the Islamic State alone carried out the attack and had no connection with Ukraine. France also contradicted Putin, saying that their intelligence indicate radical Islamists were behind the attack and not Ukraine. Meanwhile, at a counterterrorism meeting chaired by Putin, the head of the committee investigating Friday's terror attack said it was carefully planned and prepared. It also said that all 4 key suspects, all of whom were Tajikistan nationals, pleaded guilty in court and testified in detail about the instructions given to them before carrying out the deadly attack. It's been reported that 3 more men from Tajikistan have been detained on suspicion of helping prepare the terrorist attack. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council has demanded an immediate ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, urging an end to the hostilities that have devastated Gaza. This critical resolution, though widely welcomed globally, has left Israel dissatisfied with the U.S. Shin Se-byuk has more.
The United Nations Security Council on Monday adopted a resolution demanding an immediate ceasefire between Israel and the Palestinian militant group Hamas. The resolution, which passed 14-0 with the U.S. abstaining, demands an immediate ceasefire that could lead to a permanent and sustainable truce. It also called for the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages. This marks the first time the Security Council has adopted a resolution demanding a ceasefire related to the situation in Gaza.
This bloodbath has continued for far too long. It is our obligation to put an end to this bloodbath before it is too late.
The U.S. explained its reasons for abstention, stating that while it agrees a ceasefire is necessary, it believes certain, quote, key edits were missing in the resolution.
Certain key edits were ignored, including our request to add a condemnation of Hamas.
The White House National Security Advisor John Kirby stated in a briefing later the same day that the U.S. decision not to exercise its veto does not indicate a shift in U.S. policy direction. Kirby added that the U.S. backed a ceasefire but did not support the resolution because the text did not condemn Hamas. Following the adoption, Hamas welcomed the UNSC resolution, saying it was ready to engage in an immediate prisoner swap with Israel. Meanwhile, Israel, which has consistently opposed a ceasefire on the grounds that it would solely benefit Hamas, expressed particular dissatisfaction with the United States for not using its veto power this time. This led to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu abruptly canceling the planned visit of a high-level delegation to the U.S. next week. The White House expressed its very disappointment over Netanyahu's decision, but said talks between U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant would go ahead. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
South Korean football player Sun Jun-ho returned home on Monday after being detained in China for 10 months over allegations of corruption. The former national team veteran who played for Shandong Taishan in the Chinese Super League had been detained since May 2023 on alleged bribery charges, with Chinese media previously reporting that his case may be linked to match-fixing allegations involving the coach and other players on Sun's team. Seoul's foreign ministry said it had requested cooperation with Beijing through various channels to ensure a swift and fair process.
Good morning, I'm Kim Ji-young, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. Following a New York judge's ruling on Monday, former U.S. President Donald Trump's hush money trial is set to begin on April 15th. The new trial date means that Trump will become the first ever former U.S. president to go on trial for criminal charges. Judge Juan M. Merchan on Monday scolded the ex-president's legal team for a last-minute document dump to postpone the original trial date. Trump's team argued that prosecutors deliberately concealed thousands of pages of records from a prior federal investigation. But Judge Merchan appeared unconvinced by the claims of prosecutorial misconduct, which he suggested to be groundless. A separate New York appeals court ruled on the same day that Trump did not have to pay a $454 million fraud penalty ahead of his appeal, as long as he posts a smaller $175 million bond within 10 days. The $175 million bond is a victory for the ex-president, as it will block New York state authorities from processing the seizure of his assets. In Nigeria, some 137 school children have returned home after they were rescued on Sunday. They were kidnapped from a rural Kaduna state town of Kuriga and had spent more than 2 weeks in captivity. The children, many of them below the age of 10, were abducted from their school by gunmen on motorcycles on March 7th, triggering a rescue operation. 6 of the 137 students remain hospitalized, while a senior military official said that one staff member who was kidnapped with the children died in captivity. The school initially reported that a total of 287 students were kidnapped during the attack, but according to Kaduna's governor, Uba Sani, only 137 children were confirmed to have been abducted. Now to the UK's capital, where a convoy of more than 100 tractors drove to the British Parliament in protest against recent trade deals and cheap food imports. Farmers, some with Union Jack flags and banners with slogans including "No farmers, no food, no future," demanded that the government improve the country's food security by enforcing more accurate food labelling. They also call for an end to post-Brexit trade deals that allow the import of substandard, cheaper foods. Organisers Save British Farming and Fairness for Farmers of Kent echoed the message that unsupportive policies were putting the British food industry at risk. A Russian spacecraft docked at the International Space Station on Monday with 3 passengers, 1 each from the US, Russia and Belarus. The 3 members were Oleg Novitsky from Russia, Marina Vasilyevskaya from Belarus and Tracy Dyson from the US. The ISS now has a total population of 10. The Soyuz MS-25 spacecraft launched on Saturday with a 2-day delay after the initial launch was aborted due to a chemical power source issue. Space is one of the few remaining areas of cooperation between the US and Russia.
Good morning. If you're visiting Korea, I hope you are adjusting well to the changeable weather. Well, rain has been soaking the country since yesterday, and right now rain is pounding down on Jeju Island. It will continue to rain or snow through the afternoon. 5 to 30 millimeters of more rain is in the forecast across Korea. Then rain will let up from the western regions as early as before lunch, but the concern is higher for the east of Gangwon-do with more snow in the forecast. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do will see up to 15 centimeters of more snowfall through late this afternoon, with heavy snow alerts in place, while a wind advisory has been issued for the southeast coast and Jeju Island. Starting out the day, 3 to 8 degrees lower than yesterday, but highs will be similar in most places. So topping out at 13, Gwangju at 14 degrees with some sunshine in the west by the mid-afternoon. Then more rain chances for Thursday, but the weather looks more promising towards the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.